Hi there, I'm Chris Devine, and this is Six String World. About 2004, I was tracking at my friend Rob's studio, and instead of bringing my Mesa Boogie Mark III head, a cabinet, miking it up, and going through the typical guitar rig for recording, Rob suggested I grab his Line 6 pod. Now, this was around 2004. The pod had been around for a while, and I believe they even, by this point, were already on to the pod 2.0, or it was just about to come up. Now, I really wasn't very interested in the pod because I kind of lumped that in with all that old rack gear that kind of just seemed like more programming than playing. But I said, hey, why not? I'll give it a go in this instance. And dialed up a sound that was very close to my Mesa, and it came up pretty good. And I actually did a track with my Mesa Boogie rig at one point, and then I compared it to a similar track done with the pod from Line 6, and they had a Mark II C sound that was very, very similar. And the pod really, I hate to say it, kind of nailed it. If you like this channel, please hit the subscribe button, and the bell icon will let you know when I put up a new video. And if you like this video, please click the thumbs up button. And if you want to share this, well, there's a button for that as well. Anyways, okay. So I ended up getting my own bean-shaped version. And then I also got the rack version, which I paired with a power amp and a 2x12 cabinet, which became my main rig for a few years. It was flexible, but the big thing was you could edit the sounds on a computer, and that really interested me. I had a very early MIDI to joystick converter cable, and I was able to access Line 6. They have an editing software that you could put on your computer, and you could then connect the pod to your computer, and you would be able to edit all the parameters on your computer and not have to play around with the small display. And editing on the computer was so much easier. There are a lot of under the hood functions on that version of the pod, and really having the ability to adjust those parameters without having to hold a shift function to access them and not have to have a manual to guide you through the shifted functions, and then try to go back and forth and tweak whatever parameter you're trying to go if you're trying to match something up with something else. So having everything on a computer screen to be able to edit all right in front of you, it just made sense, and I was able to really dig in and get some great sounds out of it. And I really liked that feature. Now, I ended up doing a gig with my pod rack and power amp setup, and it's kind of a nondescript rig. It kind of hid on stage, and I was running the pod direct into the house via the DI and I used the 2x12 cabinet as my own stage monitoring. So that was perfect for me. I could hear myself, and the front of the house got a full image going on with a cab being modeled. I believe I used the closeback 412. And my band that I was playing with, we had a gig opening for a couple of really heavy rock bands. Both of the bands had two guitar players, and each guitar player had a Mesa dual rectifier half stack and a matching 412 cabinet. And this club was pretty big. And the bands came in and they set up basically on each side of the stage two Mesa half stacks on one side, the drummer in the middle, and then two more Mesa half stacks on the other side of the drummer. And they left them up all night. And that's four half stacks on stage between two bands. And these bands also had a professional photographer come down for this gig. And I have to say, later on, I did see the pictures that the photographer took, and it looked fantastic. It looked like a full-on Mesa Boogie ad, and it was really awesome to see. And then when I got to see the photos again, it just really cemented the whole image, which is great. But I had my little rig off to the side, and I just happened to have the Line 6 foot controller at my feet to switch sounds. And at the end of my band set, I'm packing everything up, which was a breeze because I had a 4-space rack and it contained everything. Just calling up a couple of cables, throwing the foot controller in the back of the rack, and packing it all up and ready to go. And a couple guys came up and said they were really impressed with the sounds that I had. And I said, well, thanks, I appreciate that. That's great. And they asked how I hauled all that stuff around. And I was kind of not really paying attention. It's a loud club. You're trying to pack everything up. And I said, oh, everything fits fine. I have a Honda Civic. And they were like, huh? You fit all that in a Honda Civic? And then I realized they were talking about the Meza half stacks. And they thought I was running through all those rectifiers on my side of the stage, and the other guitar player was using the rectifiers that were on his side of the stage. And he had his own little amp in the front of those diamond plate beasts that they had there, and he wasn't playing through the half stacks. But I told them, no, I'm playing through this little pod rig, and they were kind of surprised. And I kind of mentioned to them, they said, yeah, they're really usable. If you deep dive into the editing, it can really refine the sound a lot better. And it gets out of that stock or pre-programmed bit. And I've kind of figured out that a lot of players didn't really dig into this aspect, which is probably why a lot of people kind of poo-pooed the pod and a lot of modelers in general. But the big takeaway was that, from this whole thing was that a lot of multifunction items like pods or Kempers or multi-effect systems and switchers, well, these have an editing method of using the computer as the interface now. This is kind of standard, but back in 2004, that was cutting edge technology. And I have found now with so many devices, being able to plug it into your laptop or your computer and get all the editing software right there, and you can sit down and see how everything lays out. It just makes for an easier experience overall. I found it also a lot easier than trying to navigate that small display screen. Depending on the size of the item, it can be very small. Sometimes it can be a little bigger, but nothing beats having a 17-inch monitor with everything on it, and you can really go to town on all the parameters a lot easier than having to scroll back or scroll forward on a small interface that maybe only has a few adjustment knobs. Now, I also happen to believe that there are a lot of users that seek out devices like this, seek out more advanced items, and they get bogged down in the editing, and they really don't get to unlock the potential of the device or get a better understanding of really what it has to offer. Another example, I have a Boss Katana 50. It's a Mark I. It also happens to have a Boss editing software platform that goes with it. Connect up the amp via USB, and you can run the amp right from the computer. Same thing, editing, saving, everything's right there. My cousin bought this amp, and after 6 months, he realized he really didn't like it. Now, I think this is something my cousin missed out on when it came to creating sounds, and he ended up selling the amp to me, and I have to say it's a pretty powerful amp, and I've found some really great and cool tones in it for me, so it's kind of like his loss, my gain, because I had no problem, connecting this to a computer and really tweaking out some sounds that I found quite useful in there. Now, the only bummer on all that type of stuff is that this past spring, I ended up buying a new Mac, and it has the Intel chip. And I later found out, after I got everything all hooked up and set up, that Boss hadn't anticipated this version of the Mac. And none of my Boss stuff, like my MS3, my RC5 looper, my Katana, their online editing and configuration systems just didn't play with this new computer. And it was kind of a bummer. But I kept an eye on Boss's website to see when they would update their software, and slowly they did. And as of the time of this video, the only holdout on my end is the Katana Mark 1 amps still aren't available to do full editing on the Mac, but I'm hoping that'll be sorted out fairly soon. And regardless, it's something I think a lot of players don't really kind of look into. I had the Boss GT 1000 core for a review this year, and I did all my editing and sound exploration using the computer as my editing and adjusting platforms and saving presets. And there were a few players that I know that had one for a while, and they were just kind of like, eh. And I asked, they tried to tweak it, and they complained about the small display interface and how it was tough to edit and navigate. And I mentioned using the editing software, and they mentioned that they wanted to play, not program. And I get that. It really made a lot of sense when they said that. A lot of multi-effect type devices get touted as amazing sounding and easy to edit. But for some people, even easy editing is just too much. And it can be overwhelming. And sometimes those kind of pieces of equipment don't really fit in with a player, depending upon what they're looking for and their expectations of use. Now, I kind of shrugged, as with complex devices with multiple options, that extra level of tweaking is really important, especially if you're looking to dial in something very particular. That last 10% of anything is always the toughest. And when you're so close, it's worth it to take that extra time and figure it out, and then just kind of blasting through and playing and being unhappy with your sounds, or just having to return it, or even worse, just selling it for a loss. And I think that's one of those things that some players look at some of those devices and they go, oh, this will save everything, this would be great. And then they realize, yeah, it's a lot of work. It's something that they might not, that it does a lot, but are they really going to use it? And then when it gets to that point of really honing it, they don't really want to get to that detail or to that finish line. It's kind of like giving up a little bit before the finish line's there, or just maybe the fact that they got caught up in the hype of all the features and functionality and just realize that, well, that's really may not be for the typical player. Maybe a level of player that goes on the road that has to do certain things for a live show, and they'll take the time and go through and over and over and over and really refine their sounds and patches. That's a really kind of, that's dedication. That's what a true professional does at that. And for a lot of players, they just want to get a really great sound very easily. And, a lot of times the reason something sounds so easy and sounds so good is because people are making it easy because they've navigated all this work and they know what it takes to get into it. And they just dive right in and don't come up until they've completed the task. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But I'd like to talk to you guys and see, have you found that going into that extra mile into editing software, is that worth it for you guys, or is it just too much to deal with and it's just overwhelming? You just want to play more and not program, or once you get a couple things in, you're set and you really just don't tweak with it too much? I'd love to hear from you guys of how you do your editing for your multi-effects devices and all sorts of stuff like that. Please leave a comment in the space below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the subject. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Take care.